Despite showing a natural aptitude for closing doors since she was a little girl, you might wonder if Professor Rebecca Safran wasn't born in a barn. The CU professor of ecology and evolutionary biology has spent much of the last decade exploring dank, shadowy barns in search of the Hirundo rustica, more commonly known as the barn swallow. This tiny bird is the subject of a new study published in the journal Current Biology. Dr. Safran led researchers from the University of Colorado and 2 other schools in the nearly 2-year-long study.
So barn swallows breed in barns. Females really have the upper hand in the mating game. Males are kind of a dime a dozen, and females are really holding their cards close to their chest. When we manipulate a male's color to look darker, he does better. He attracts more mates, and he has more offspring. This is the currency of evolution, having a number of babies. The surprising finding is that by simply changing a male's appearance, his physiology also changed. Males who were made darker lost weight, and their testosterone levels increased at a time in the season when testosterone is usually in decline.
You're a star, birdie.
I study the barn swallow because it's a songbird that is incredibly widespread. My research program is focused on figuring out how and why males look different and what that means in terms of the evolutionary trajectory of these populations. What we believe is happening is that we are actually able to record evolution in action. That is, we're studying the formation of new species as they are evolving. Barn swallows are highly social. Relative to other songbirds out there, their nests are easy to find and they're pretty easy to catch. And when you do catch them, they're fairly willing participants. We have about 60 sites in Boulder County, not too far from campus. This morning we are at a study site east of Longmont, not so far from the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Using mist nets, we capture individuals very temporarily. We give them markers that allow us to identify individuals as they're pairing and as they're feeding offspring. We can collect a lot of data on personal appearance. It's just really exciting to not only explain the big picture of what I'm doing, but to actually put a bird in their hand for the first time.
It's great getting up and going and catching these birds.
And then we have our net all stretched out, and then once we see several go in there, we just run around as fast as we can and try to get the net up and block the entrance off completely.
When there's birds in the barn and we're trying to get them into the net, we go in there and clap. First time I held one in my hand, it was amazing because they're so tiny and they sit in your hand and they're so calm.
This whole notion that the clothes make the man, I mean, it's repeated throughout the animal kingdom. It's not unique to barn swallows. We can look at them here and compare it to other populations all across the world and see how evolution and geography has shaped these characteristics and then how that shapes sexual selection.
It's actually impossible to do my work without their help. And so they're incredibly valuable resources that not only push the envelope in terms of the science I'm doing, but on a day-to-day level keep it really exciting and interesting for me because I love the process of mentoring.
Just when we thought we knew all there was to know about the birds and the bees, well, the birds anyway, the results from Safran's new study fly in the face of previous assumptions about barn swallow mate selection and, more importantly, evolution. The brilliant Dr. Safran sat down with Christy Scarborough, no bird brain herself, to find out why brightly colored male barn swallows succeed with flying colors during the mating season.
Hi, my name is Christy Scarborough. Today we're here with Rebecca Safran, Assistant Professor in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology here at CU. Rebecca joins us today to talk about her research on barn swallows. Hi Rebecca, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Christy.
Awesome. Well, tell us about your overall research.
Yeah, so I am an evolutionary ecologist, and the basic framework for my studies are to do a comparative analysis of the barn swallow, which is a really intriguing system with respect to how much variation there is across this huge distribution of this one species. And so we study the barn swallow in the Middle East, we study the barn swallow in Western Europe, and we study this species right here in Boulder County. And it's just a fascinating example of speciation in action because we have these populations that currently look very different. And so what we're trying to do right here in Boulder is figure out what the evolutionary pressures are on males and females and how those differ across our study sites to figure out and understand the fundamental ways in which evolution works to produce new species.
And so there's this interesting trade-off between having this trait that's sort of cumbersome, but also being a male that is the most showy and the most interesting to the opposite sex.
So what was the most surprising thing that you discovered in your research?
There's been a lot of surprises. We've been studying this system for about 10 years now.
Wow.
And some of the surprises have just been figuring out why there's so much variation across this widespread species complex. From a genetic perspective, the surprises are that there's very little genetic differentiation between individuals in the Middle East and individuals right here in Boulder County. But despite the fact that there's so little genetic variation, morphological variation and behavioral variation is just incredibly extreme. And so as an evolutionary biologist, we're really interested in understanding what is creating and maintaining that variation. So there's been lots of different surprises, and some of them are related to the signals that males use to advertise their quality in order to acquire a mate. And so one of the surprises has been that females are interested in a very different set of traits that males possess in our different study systems. So if you're talking about female choice in Western Europe, females are really interested in one set of feather-based traits. But if you're talking about our females here in North American populations, females are really interested in how dark a male's feather coloration is.
How did you figure that out?
Well, the first thing that one does in an evolutionary study is just to simply look at the natural variation that exists in a population and figure out, does, for example, this trait predict anything about a male's reproductive success? So actually, I figured out as a graduate student that something very different seemed to be happening in terms of the process of mate selection and the signals used in mate selection in North America than in Western European populations. And so we started to do manipulative experiments by darkening the breast colors of these males to figure out if females are truly paying attention to this trait. And our experiments, just by simply adding color with a magic marker that costs about $4, definitely revealed that females are paying very close attention to changes in the signal and updating their opinion of a male according to our manipulation.
Have you seen any differences between their habitats from the Middle East to Boulder, to other places you've been to? Have you seen differences in like their habitats and their eating habits and all that?
Well, we're not studying the diet. These are all
so you're
aerial.
just studying the
Yeah.
Right, the
So
mating.
in terms of the social behavior, that's a wonderful question. Are there differences in the basic social behavior? And the other trait that makes these populations so interesting to us is that there's just incredible variation in social behavior in all of the populations. So some of our birds breed in solitary pairs and some breed in really large groups. And there are very different reproductive consequences depending on your social behavior. But that's true across all of our populations.
Does your study tell us anything about human evolution?
Well, like barn swallows, humans are highly social, and we have very complex mating systems. One hates to sort of cut and paste and say, well, you know, in this other vertebrate system that has very similar social behavior, you know, one thing is going on and apply it directly to humans. But I can say, although it's fairly dangerous to say this, that the mating systems of barn swallows is very similar to humans in that males and females are both interested in choosing the best mate out there, and that might not be the individual that you're actually paired with. And so males and females both mate multiply, and they mate outside of their pair bond, and genetic evidence in human populations suggests that that's also going on.
Okay, so this kind of raises one question to me. Is there bisexuality, homosexuality, and do they have like certain times of the year that they mate, or is it just like how we do it and dolphins do it?
Well, the basic mating system, the fundamental unit, is a male and a female who are seemingly very cooperative. It's a lot of work to build a nest. It's a lot of work to feed the young. But the reason that we look at the genetics of the mating system is that it reveals a very different and complex picture. So what it reveals is that males and females are both choosing to mate with other neighbors or with other individuals that are at other breeding sites, in fact.
So they're nest hopping.
They are nest hopping, but on the sly, because they really want to maintain this cooperative pair bond just to coordinate the efforts of feeding young and defending their nest from predators.
Okay. What are some challenges of the study that you had?
So the challenges of our study are that we have to get up fairly early. At least my undergraduates say that's one of the challenges, which isn't trivial. We start our day sometimes at 3:30 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
These birds are, for better or for worse, among the first animals that are up, and so we need to be up with them, catching them as they wake up and go out for their first foraging movements in the morning. And so, just the actual practical logistics of setting them are not trivial. Some of the other logistics that are a little bit tough are actually figuring out who's interacting with whom. If you're in a barn swallow colony trying to figure out which individual is mating with whom, it's actually very difficult. It's sort of a big swarming mess of animals flying around. So it's not that easy to track one individual over another unless they're at a central location like a nest.
Okay. Let's see. What about the study surprised you? Were there any kind of unexpected results? And if so, go ahead and
Sure,
explain them.
yeah. So I had mentioned that we have manipulated breast coloration
Okay.
of a male to figure out if a female's paying attention to this trait. And one of the things that really surprised us about doing that is, well, how is this male doing better? All we've done is applied a thin coat of magic marker, and all of a sudden he becomes a hotshot. One of the sort of prevailing dogmas in my field is that testosterone is the molecule that really mediates a lot of sexual and dominance-related behavior. The prevailing view is that males who are naturally darker have higher levels of testosterone, and we did find that's actually the case. But one thing that really surprised us is that when we simply add, a coat of marker to a male's feather coloration, we actually change and adjust his physiology. So he actually has increased testosterone levels that are probably accommodating to his new physiology and therefore making him actually behave appropriately.
Just from putting magic
Just
marker
from
on his
putting magic
feathers?
marker, right, exactly.
That is surprising.
Which is sort of something we can probably relate to if somebody had said to you, hey, let's completely suit you up in Armani. You would actually feel,
Please do.
pretty excited. And now we have some good evidence that there is a physiological basis for your newfound status. Your androgen levels or your testosterone levels actually accommodate to changes in your physiological appearance.
So you had undergraduate students with you that was also doing the research?
Yeah, I had 3 undergraduates working with me this last summer. This was our first summer of studies in Boulder County.
Oh, wow.
And a new graduate student.
Awesome. That's so cool. Is there any other research that you do at CU besides the barn swallows?
Right now we're currently fairly busy coordinating all the data that's coming in from the Middle East and from Europe. We're expanding our study now into populations that live along the Nile in Egypt and into Japan. So this study system is keeping us fairly busy at the moment.
So you have other people in other locations still sending you research
Absolutely.
and feedback?
We have a really large research team. There's about 12 of us now.
How
all
long do
across
you
the world.
think the research is going to keep on going?
Well, the more we find, the more questions we get,
Yeah.
and so it just keeps getting more exciting all the time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.